was a bit nervous and was kind of scrambling because actually it wasn't until last night. It wasn't until somebody mentioned me in the chat that, oh yeah, you got. I can't wait for Scott's stream tomorrow with you, and I'm like, oh my god, I like Thursday already came and here we are. So hold on
We,
a
we can
second.
reschedule if you're not
No,
ready.
oh no, dude, no, it's all good, man. Let's see. Yeah, okay, collapse this. Here we go. So yeah, you know, it's kind of funny. I was just looking at the email when I sent it to you. It was 9 days ago, and I'm just thinking about all the stuff that I wrote within the questions I asked you, and I'm just thinking, wow, I guess a week is a very long time in politics indeed. So, like, I don't know where to start. So,
Throw away that list and just start from scratch.
well, I mean, some of them you probably have already answered from the get go, is in regards to Nordstream and
Oh, I'm
like,
kidding. You ask whatever questions you want. I'm prepared to answer anything you ask. So
um, so yeah, no, just in regards to Nordstream, like, what we're seeing here is now kind of like a reshifting of I think like the gas and energy market, and you know, but we still have a lot of people that are kind of skeptical on whether or not the U.S. did it, and some people are kind of straw manning it towards like, oh, you just think America's bad, you have no concrete evidence. Even though there were military exercises conducted within the Bromholm area, and not to mention, I think there were some choppers flying around the operation when this explosion went off. What would be your kind of counter towards people that are still kind of questioning whether the United States would be behind this or not?
well, the first thing I'll start off is to say that there are people serving life sentences in the United States prison system who were convicted on circumstantial cases that are far weaker than the case that could be made against the United States. Let's just start off with intent. Joe Biden, President of the United States, February 7th, states straight up, if Russia moves into Ukraine, we're taking the pipeline out. Straight up. It's a quid pro quo. I mean, Biden's Mr. Quid pro quo. Remember, son of a bitch. Hey, $1 billion. So he knows what a quid pro quo is. He understands what's going on. Well, he's got a legal mind. So, yeah, intent, motive. Geez, who could we call up to testify for Anthony Blinken, Secretary of State, saying, this structure of the pipeline has provided us with tremendous opportunity. Tremendous opportunity.
Which is weird wording. I was going to say that's really weird wording from the get go, because that alone should not at least raise some eyebrows. You know, basic critical thinking skills of like, why would you say this about like a massive
an act of international terror?
Exactly.
That's like me on 9/11. World Trade Centers collapsed. Tremendous opportunity, guys. Tremendous opportunities. Look at the upside of this. Exactly. There is no upside. And blowing up a major piece, destroying a major piece of European infrastructure. Hey, let's just say the Russians did it.
Yeah.
Let's just say right off. Why in God's name would the Secretary of State come out and say, tremendous opportunity? His first words should be, I condemn strongly the act of international terrorism perpetrated by the Russian Federation on a piece of critical energy infrastructure for our European allies. That's the statement you make. Instead, tremendous opportunity. Why? Because you made the opportunity, Blinken. You know who did this. You know you did it. And now you're looking for the opportunity. And the last one is the means. As you said, not only did the U.S. Navy hold exercises over the exact same area, the exercises were for underwater demolitions. Come on, man. You got the murder weapon right there. But even then, on that alone, I could convict anybody. That alone, I would convict anybody associated within that circle, and they would go to jail for life for an act of international terrorism. But we can even take it a step further. The Swedes have come out and said, we've completed our investigation, and we know that it is an act of sabotage, underwater demolition. But here's the kicker. The United States could add a lot to this if they want to talk about it. Yep. Now, why would the Swedes say that? Why would the Swedes come out and basically throw America under the bus? They didn't say America did it. They just said, we've collected the evidence, and we believe the United States could shine some light on this.
Well, well,
Why?
well, not to mention is that like if I recall is that like Russia's not involved in this investigation. Like they're not in the investigation of their own pipeline. That from the get go, like it's only the United States, Denmark, and Sweden, if I recall. I think I got the countries right. Like that alone, if you're not including the partner of their own pipeline, regardless if it's on somebody else's territory, it's their pipeline. And even when they had the UN, I think, emergency meeting, they wanted to get Gazprom involved and like have a meeting, and even like Brazil, India, China, they were basically on Russia's side to some degree, saying like, yeah, there should be a proper investigation on this, but they shut this down. And I just say to people all the time, it's like, dude, right? Like basic common sense, critical thinking skills. Why are they shutting down an investigation? There's two actors in it. Well, I say multiple actors, but two main core actors in this situation. Why can't we just have a proper investigation regarding like, tons of gas being leaked? Well, that itself is an environmental concern too, is that this will change the whole infrastructure in terms of like who's selling gas and where it flows. It's basic stuff, but of course nobody lacks any form of common sense or critical thinking skills. So is that a fair observation on that regard?
Well, yeah. Look, you. If I committed the crime, the last thing I want is a detailed investigation. What I want to do, but let's say I'm the corrupt chief of police, and my boys have been out there committing crimes. I'm going to basically run the biggest whitewash investigation possible, and that's what's happening here. They don't want a detailed investigation because they don't want the truth out. But unfortunately for the United States, it's like planning a murder. Popping off 3 rounds and only to wake up to find out the dude's still alive. What do you mean one of the Nordstream 2 pipelines are still up and running? What do you mean by that? I didn't kill that. I said you're going to kill them all. What do you mean? So now U.S., because Russia still maintains the leverage we thought we had taken off the table. Remember, what triggered this wasn't the tanks going into Ukraine per se. It was the German people demonstrating in the streets, demanding that their government turn on the pipeline.
Yep.
And the United States went, we can't give the German government that option. So an act of international terrorism. Unfortunately for the United States, they didn't kill everybody. One person's still alive, and the same leverage that Russia had is still up. And take a look at the Germans now. They're demonstrating, they're screaming, they're mad, they're angry, they're demanding the resignation of Scholz. It's just going to get worse for the Germans. And what's the United States going to go? Sneak into the hospital room and kill the guy in front of everybody? So this is just incompetence. And let me just put this out there. For all you conspiracy theorists anywhere in the world who seem to believe that the United States is capable of the most nefarious conspiracies ever concocted and that they can get away, I think we need to come up with the understanding that the United States government is incompetent to the core. They're not capable of carrying out this kind of conspiracy. They always make mistakes because they're shallow-minded, they're reactive, not proactive. They panic, and they actually have this sense of entitlement that most narcissistic murderers have. I'll get away with it. They're not going to get away with this. I think this crime, and it is a crime, is going to come back to haunt the United States, especially this winter, when the Europeans are going to have plenty of long, cold nights to reflect on why they're having long, cold nights. And they will come up with the conclusion is the United States is not our friend. The United States does nothing to help us. They do everything to hurt us. This is all America's fault. I know that's not the narrative that the United States and its allies in the European political and economic elite are putting out there. They're of course saying this is all Putin's fault. This is Putin's.
But of course, there's no that's the thing I try to tell people for the other side is like, listen, look, if you think the United States did it, there's a lot of substance to back this up. If you're just one of those types is like, okay, I want to see concrete evidence, 100% hard evidence. I don't want to touch this until then. I respect that too. But if you're going to say that Russia did this, I want to see some substance to your argument. Like actual detailed things to back this up. Everything I've seen is just like, of course they would do this. they would like to put a chokehold on Europe. It's just like, guys, okay, you're just making statements. Do you actually have anything to back this up with? Because I've never seen any substance to back this up in the fact that like Russia would do this at all. I don't see it whatsoever.
Well, remember, we should never forget that Russia is a major exporter of energy.
Mm-hmm.
That's it is the principal way that their economy functions. Major exporters of energy don't become major exporters of energy by destroying the multi-billion-dollar infrastructure necessary to export their energy. It's not a sound business model. It's not how it works. The other thing is Russia doesn't just possess the capability of exporting energy. It does it, and it does it long term on a reliable basis. Russia has never weaponized energy, meaning we're going to turn off the gas to do X. They turn off the gas usually because of contractual reasons, or in the case of hostility, there might be some things. But Russia has never preemptively just come in and said, I need you to do X, therefore we're turning off the gas until you do X. Hasn't happened. The United States has hung that canard over Europe for decades. The Russians will weaponize energy. The Russians will weaponize, first of all, the Soviets will weaponize energy. That's the Russians will weaponize energy. Russia doesn't weaponize energy. The damage being done to Europe right now has nothing to do with Russia and everything to do with Europe. And they're just making matters worse. Now they've gone out and they've tried to, European, this is, people, I think a lot of people wonder what was going on in Rome as Rome was falling. What could the Senate have been doing? What could the emperor have been doing? We're getting an idea now of the kind of insanity that takes place as empires collapse. The sense of self-entitlement, where the European Union, the European Commission meet and just continue to throw out sanctions. We're going to sanction Russia some more. Sanctions, and the Russians are like, please, we've already dealt with the worst you can do with us. All these little petty sanctions, we don't care. And then they say, well, we're going to cap oil and cap gas, and we're going to interfere with the global energy markets. Well, the global energy market just met. That's Saudi Arabia and Russia.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that.
Said, no, you're not. And that's it. Everything Europe has done has been self-inflicted. It's suicide. But the thing is, it's suicide conducted by an elite, many of whom are unelected, by the way. Some of these European Union officials are appointed. They're not elected.
That's the problem I have with the European Union, not to go off on a tangent, but I try to tell people all the time is that I have nothing, like, I have no problem with, like, independent trading blocks and trading zones. It's just that the European Union, like, originally was an economic cooperation union. But like I said, it evolved in towards a bureaucracy to the point where it's infringing on sovereign rights. And like I said, these bureaucrats are dictating like the specific control of like resources and what you can and cannot say. Like we're seeing this right now with like Hungary and how they're punishing them and what they consider a democracy. And like, basically with them being a part of the European Union, they have to fall in line with their sanctions and everything. So like, to me, that's not a cooperation zone of any form. Like I said, that's a higher level bureaucracy. Most people don't seem to understand that.
No, well, the Europeans understand it. They know it. And they know what's going to happen. I mean, many European countries, in order to become part of the union, functioning as a union, have basically deindustrialized, turning their country into a little more than a, underpaid workforce for greater Europe, meaning Germany, France, Italy. My wife and I were talking the other day about Under the Tuscan Sun, and movie, Diane Lane, yay, romantic comedy. But we're sitting there going, wait a minute, what was happening under? You have an economy where the rich Germans are coming in to buy a villa at cheap prices because the Italian economy is down. But in order for the Italian economy to function, they have to bring in foreign workers, Polish workers, who do the labor for them. And we're like, well, that's sort of the European Union. That's the Germans coming in thinking they can push their weight around because they got and then the Poles and the other disenfranchised members have to come in and do the dirt cheap labor, where you have a literature professor, mixing mortar and laying bricks. And we're like, that's it. And I said, but there's one part you're missing. The entitled American who comes in and saves everything. You see, this is the European Union with an American Hollywood ending. But if this was going to work, Diane Lane, instead of coming in and making everything harmonious, would come in and get the Poles to murder the Italians, get the Germans to, invest in, bad Italian food, get sick and die, and then sit back there and gleefully say, we own it all now. Because that's what America's doing. We're destroying Europe. There's talk today about Audi potentially moving its manufacturing processes out of Germany to the United States. There's no major. Think about it. You're the head of a multinational corporation. I know they're based in Germany. They're a multinational corporation, which means they're responsive to a multinational board of directors. And the board of directors is sitting there going, "What are you trying to tell me again? You're trying to tell me that we're going to have to shut the factory down because Germany can't afford the gas." Let me ask you a question, Mr. Chairman. Why the hell are we in Germany? If Germany doesn't have the infrastructure to sustain our business, and our business is not a German business, our business happens to be headquarters in Germany, produces cars in Germany, but it's a global business. If Germany can't sustain our business, then why are we doing business in Germany? And there's people saying, that is a damn good question. I heard that there's an automobile plant outside of Detroit that hasn't been working for a while, and I think we could actually redo it up. And you know who's happy right now? Every senator in Michigan, every Detroit mayor, everybody in the United States is going, more jobs, more jobs. Joe Biden's going, oh, thank God, I can get the job numbers up, make inflation go away, whatever. Exactly. The point is, America's not your friend, Europe. America's not your friend. America is your number one enemy in the world. Nothing America does is for your benefit. You only exist to benefit us. And when you started to wake up to the fact that what made you function as a continent wasn't American militarism, because that sucks. That got you into Afghanistan. That hasn't accomplished anything, but cheap Russian gas. That the key to European success was cheap Russian gas. And now the Americans want to turn that gas off. So you have to pay 3, 4, 5, 10 times the price for gas. And where's the gas coming from? America. So no, Europe, America's your enemy. Everything we touch gets infected and rots and dies.
Well, that's the thing people don't.
We blew up your infrastructure.
Yeah, I was going to say, but that's the thing people don't understand about is just like this is just a big privateer capitalistic opportunity for them, and many people don't see that side of things. They just see Russia bad and nothing else. I would like to move on to but that was really great. Everyone in the chat's loving it. I did too. I wanted though to bring up, because it seems that some independent intelligence officers have brought up what we kind of have been speculating, in that Ukraine was behind the assassination of Alexander Dugin's daughter, Dugina. Now, like I said, this is from the New York Times, which I thought to be interesting right from the get-go. Because usually, like, they would be, like they just wrote a puff piece, like a glowing puff piece of, like, the Azov Nazis being, like, rescued, prisoner exchange, like, all the disgusting stuff. But they came out and they said, yeah, Ukraine may be behind this possible act of terrorism. And, like, would that be considered, like, an act of terrorism? Because some people have been speculating that, in whether the fact that she could have been intentionally targeted or her father was. So what would your take be on that?
Well, first of all, in the interest of full disclosure, she was targeted because her name's on a list, the Mirotvorets list.
Yes.
It's an assassination list. I'm on that list. Mm-hmm. So anything I say could be seen to be in the self-interest of myself. I'm just putting that out there sort of sarcastically to note that for anybody who thinks that being on that name is just a gag, not a big deal. No, it's a huge deal. It's an assassination list. They kill people for the thoughts in their head. They don't kill people because they actually did something. This is not the Mossad hit list against the perpetrators of the Munich, massacre in the Olympics in '72. This is not, the United States hunting down the perpetrators of 9/11. This is the Ukrainian government taking umbrage at anybody who dares challenge their narrative. Anybody who dares says, hold on, that fact set doesn't compute. Let me provide you an alternative fact set, et cetera. And Ukrainian government has deemed that anybody who does this is an information terrorist. Information terrorist. So, from their perspective, killing Darya Dugina, who is an information terrorist, not only an information terrorist, she's a war criminal, a war criminal for the thoughts in her head. They are targeted to be killed. Now, let's break this into two things. We'll start with Darya Dugina herself. There's some question as to whether or not she was the target or her father was the target or both were the target.
And I think that would make a big, case in regards to whether would this be considered an act of terror? Because if she was randomly killed in this situation, that would be really, really messed up situation. Because, like I said, you now have a mourning father who is never going to see his daughter again because being caught up in this whole mix of things. But
is that worse than being deliberately targeted? Because her father's on the list too.
Well, that's true. That's true.
So the bottom line is they were murdering people based upon a name appearing on a list. Okay. Her father hasn't done anything. He's a philosopher. Again, you don't have to sit there and say, I support Alexander Dugin.
Exactly.
I'll tell you right now, I don't support Alexander Dugin. Mm-hmm. I find a lot of his thinking to be very far right and concerning in terms of the ultranationalism that it embraces. But I respect his right to articulate his beliefs in the manner that he believes best suits his purpose. So if he says things and he gets the ear of Vladimir Putin, although I think that aspect of it's exaggerated as well, but he gets the ear of anybody, good for him. And if you don't like what Alexander Dugin's saying, then my goodness, come up with your own version of events, write it up, do your own podcast, make your own videos, come out and counter it. A battle of ideas. Imagine that. A genuine battle of ideas where people had civil debate, discussion, dialogue, and let the person who can best articulate their position and back it up with facts emerge as the victor. And the loser is not killed. The loser instead learns from the process and says, I may still disagree with you, but now I have to go back and refine my position. And you know what happens to a society that goes through this kind of interactive discussion process? It becomes stronger morally, intellectually. But that's not what the Ukrainians do. The Ukrainians don't want to have that debate. So they kill people. Right off the bat, take a look at U.S. code, and I don't have it off the top of my head, but I did look it up and actually started writing a paper about it. But I'm old and senile, so things slip my mind. But the U.S. criminal code or U.S. code on terrorism, and particularly, international terrorism, political terrorism, this is it. This exactly murdering somebody to intimidate other people, to silence people. It's an act of terrorism. So there is no debate, legally speaking, that what happened inside Moscow when Darya Dugina was killed, there's no debate. It was murder. It was an act of international terrorism. Why is this important? Because according to the New York Times, U.S. intelligence, and let's just start with the process of the New York Times. The New York Times has become a mouthpiece of the U.S. establishment.
Yeah.
The New York Times is no longer in the business of publishing people like Seymour Hersh, the Pulitzer Prize winning investigative journalist who used to piss the hell out of, I don't know if I can say that word, irritate the heck out of everybody for, his in-depth, accurate reporting on topics the U.S. government didn't want you to know about. No, that's not how the New York Times works anymore. The New York Times is literally the mouthpiece of the Democratic establishment, not even the establishment, the Democratic establishment. And I'm just stating a fact. Mm-hmm. And so we have the Democratic establishment in power. Right now, the Democratic establishment has invested heavily politically and in terms of material support into the cause of Ukraine. The CIA actually works hand in glove with Ukrainian security services and information warfare to shape public perception in the United States and globally about the glorious nature of the Ukrainian cause. The State Department brings over confirmed Nazis that if I stripped them naked would have swastikas on their body. brings them into Congress, takes crippled Nazis who managed somehow to survive a Russian bomb with only losing arms, and takes them to a orthopedic doctor so they can get prosthesis. And we cheer them as they come off the airplane. Hey, the Nazis are arriving in America so we can give them artificial limbs. That this is because of the work of the CIA, the State Department. It's there. The famous saying that Zelensky put out there about, I don't need a ride, I need ammunition. When people said, you should leave the country. He never said it. Straight up never said it. Research the saying, goes back to one source, an unnamed U.S. intelligence official at the U.S. Embassy in Kiev. Mm-hmm. So we manufacture everything about these people. And why is this important? Because the New York Times just ran a story that's critical. Mm-hmm. And the story is sourced to the CIA, intelligence officials, who said, we did an investigation and we've come to the conclusion that Darya Dugina was killed by personnel, organizations linked or directed by the Ukrainian government. Now, let's just pull back just a second. I already told you it's an act of international terrorism. So the people perpetrating the crime are international terrorists. And the people who order the crime have conspired with international terrorists to commit international terrorism. Now, let's remove the Ukraine title and let me replace it instead with Al-Qaeda. Let's say we have an Al-Qaeda operative terrorist going in to murder somebody who has spoken out against Al-Qaeda, and they're directed by state sponsor. They now become a state sponsor of terrorism. Wow, what would we do in the United States? We'd bomb the living hell out of them. That's what we do to terrorists. We blow them up. We intervene. We annihilate them. We've had a history of doing this. Do we really carry out an investigation that reaches this conclusion only to say, shame on you, you shouldn't do that. You're in danger of escalating this confrontation. Has the United States become that soft on terrorism that we fail to call a spade a spade? We fail to identify the evil that it is? And that's the real story here. This is about reining in an organization that's out of control. And I even question if it's about reining in an organization or a system. And the way I said that is, once upon a time in Hollywood, great movie, by the way, I was an intelligence officer. And whether I did things or whether I was familiar with things doesn't matter. I didn't do anything bad, trust me. My lips are moving, trust me. Mike Pompeo. No, I wouldn't be talking to you if I was a evildoer. But I'm familiar with what's required for something like this. To get an assassin into the target, it's an act of infiltration. To get her there in a manner that evades detection requires a cover story. It requires documents to be prepared. It requires a reception committee, not a person, but a committee, to receive her and to get to her a safe house that is already deemed to be safe from surveillance. It's a safe house that is tested. They know it's out of the eye. Received. She has to eat. She has to maneuver. She has to have vehicles. License plates have to be changed on the vehicles. This requires, again, resources. You don't acquire these license plates on the spur of the moment. They've existed. They've been acquired for this purpose. This is a mission that was planned in great detail. Then after, she has to acquire the weapon. She has to be trained in the use of the weapon. Now, maybe they tested this weapon out beforehand in Ukraine, and then they got the same weapon that's tested, because it has to be the exact same thing. These things just don't happen on a whim. She was trained to carry out this project. She implemented the project. So they had to bring in the weapon. It's remote detonated. They had to test the communications, make sure that they were compatible with whatever system's going on with the Russians to protect it. And then she had to be exfiltrated to a nation willing to receive her, which means that that nation had to be briefed in advance. Is Ukraine capable of doing everything I just said? Hell no. Hell no. The United States is, Great Britain is, but not Ukraine. So the idea that the United States didn't know anything about this, nothing whatsoever, is absurd in the extreme. And the idea that the United States didn't facilitate this is absurd in the extreme. This is the CIA's covering its own butt. This is the CIA saying, holy cow, the Russians are going to dig. You remember, you say, well, what could the Russians find out? I don't know. Remember the case in Italy where the CIA abducted somebody? And next, the CIA, the Italians got the phone records and went, "We got them all by name," and they indicted them. Put out an indictment and said, "We want to arrest all these people and charge them with terrorism."
Wait, hold on. Was this Operation Gladio, if I recall?
No, Gladio's a bigger
Oh, okay.
the Cold War project to put stay behind units if the Soviets ever came in. Well, this was, I don't know the code name of it, but it just recently happened. I mean, a couple
Oh,
years
recently
ago.
happened. Wow. Okay.
And no, the Italians were rolling them up and going, "We got the phone records." And the phone records, because the CIA, because they're not that good. Pro hand, everybody, they're really not that good. They're not as good as you think they are. Their codes get cracked all the time. They're look at Russia. Russia arrests the CIA officers and kicks them out all the time because they screw up. They're not that good. There's a great big legend about the CIA. Most of them are drunks, alcoholics, prostitute mongering thugs who sit back, lie on their expense reports to receive salaries, pad it, they're corrupt, etc. Some of them are good. I'm not condemning them all, but the vast majority of them are not very good people and not very good at what they do, which is why they get caught. If these people who did this, the Darya Dugina, if they were any good, the world would be going, "What the hell happened? I don't understand what happened." You know who's pretty good at this kind of stuff? The Israelis. A lot of stuff happens around the world, and everybody's going, "I don't know what happened. We think it was the Israelis, but we can't prove it." They're not perfect. Every once in a while, the Iranians go, "Haha, we got the goods on the Israelis." Even the Mossad makes mistakes, but the CIA makes mistakes all the time. And huge mistakes were made here. The Russians were able to wrap this thing up this quick. And the CIA sitting there going, "Damn, they're going to put two and two together and they're going to come after us. So we're going to preempt this by leaking this conclusion to the CIA, to the New York Times, and we're going to get a narrative out there that counters anything the Russians might come back at us with." And that's the purpose here. This isn't about truth telling. This is about covering the CIA's butt. The CIA,
no, it's all about PR, really, because like that's the whole point of the CIA is to control information. It's an informational
well,
situation.
That's not the whole point. They do things like assassinate.
Yeah,
they do things like regime change. They collect intelligence.
You get my point, though. I was going to say, sorry, Scott. I just got a warning from Zoom that they're going to end this meeting in like less than a minute, so I'll send you another link and we'll get back to it. Is that okay?
That's okay. Zoom or the CIA? I mean, tell me what's going on here.
But we'll be back in 2 seconds, though.
All right.
Let's see here. All right, and Scott is back. So yeah, so indeed, a lot of great information in regards to U.S. intelligence and everything. In fact, well, I obviously know that you're definitely not one of the baddies, because my viewers would know that I would not tolerate that one bit and you would not be on my show.
Well, I'm really good at covering my tracks. So.
There you go. There you go.
Your video is not on, so I don't know if that needs to happen. Or...
Yeah, I don't know. Zoom's being stupid and stuff, but if they see you, I think a lot of people came to see you specifically, okay. So it's all good. It's all good. Besides, I look like kind of like John McClane in Die Hard 3, like bad hangover and everything, need to shave, so it's all good.
Successful movie.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, one of the bigger questions I was going to ask too, because I mean, a lot of this is mostly speculation, but I'd like to hear your take, is that, well, of course, with the annexation going on with the Zaporizhia, Kherson, Luhansk, and Donetsk, one of the things that was transferred in the annexation was the Zaporizhia power plant. And this is the largest electrical power plant in the world, energy plant, I think, at least. It's nuclear, electric, it's the whole 9 yards. Point is that a lot of people have been thinking, though, like this has access towards like 50% of Ukraine's electrical grid, and that Putin may be using this, or at least the Russian Federation, to have some control on the battlefield, the electrical grid and such. Like, is this a bunch of like, conspiracy gobbledygook, or do you think there's something substantial in the fact that, Russia's in control of this power plant now? I want to know your thoughts.
If the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant was operating at full capacity, with all 6 reactors up and running, it would be able to generate about 25% of Ukraine's electrical generation. Mm-hmm. None of the reactors are up and running right now. They've all been shut down. So there's no electrical generation taking place. So anybody who thinks that this is about Russia stealing Ukrainian energy or anything like that, Russia is taking over the plant because the plant operates on soil that is now part of Russia. But Russia didn't go to war to get a 1970s era nuclear power plant or 1980s era nuclear power plant. Russia, did a special military operation to resolve a untenable situation in the Donbass, and in doing so, also resolve an untenable situation in Crimea. The seizure of Kherson,
Mm-hmm.
Secures water that had been cut off from Crimea since 2014. It provides strategic depth to Crimea, and by taking over Zaporizhia, a land bridge is created between now the expanded Crimea island, and it connects it with the Donbass and now Russia. So, that's sort of the big picture. And if you think that all that I just described is outweighed by 6 non-functioning nuclear reactors, then you probably need to go back to graduate school and take a course on, geopolitics. Russia generates sufficient electricity and is able to provide sufficient electricity to these new areas. They don't need the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. Denying Ukraine access to this, given the fact that even when this war started, only 2 of the 6 were operating, and one of those was at 50% capacity. So it's not like Russia has suddenly scored a major victory over Ukraine. Ukraine is scoring its own major victory over itself with its own energy policies. Ukraine's energy emergency is such that they've just notified their European partners that they will probably be compelled to stop transmitting electricity to Europe because of insufficient needs. But these insufficient needs exist separate from the issue of the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. As I said, even if the plant was in control of Ukraine today, the reactors aren't generating electricity. Even if you brought some of the reactors up, they still exist in a war zone. And safety-wise, as the Ukrainian shelling of its own nuclear power plant proves, it's not a good idea. So, no, I don't buy into that conspiracy.
Yeah, no, I thought it was a little kind of out there too. But regardless, I did see the kind of the Russian control of it to be kind of substantial to some degree, because as you mentioned, there was, after the referendum in Crimea, there was the cutoff of the water supply and everything. And now that there's going to be kind of a moving amount of resources towards the whole region, I think like that will be substantial, especially
Right,
towards those regions. Yeah.
but understand this: Russia is a nation of laws. I know there's people
Mm-hmm.
out there rolling their eyes. No, no, he's a dictator. No, nation of laws. Um, and especially when it comes to international law, Russia is assiduous with adhering to its requirements. What has Russia just done? Prior to this, think of this: when the IAEA visited the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, did they go to Moscow or did they go to Kiev? Short answer is Kiev. Why? Because Kiev is the one who has signed a nuclear safeguards agreement with the IAEA that gives the IAEA legal access to the facility. And because of that safeguards agreement, Ukraine could operate that facility without fear of international consequence, because it would be deemed to be operating in accordance with Ukraine's obligations under the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Russia has just taken over Zaporizhia. They've taken over the nuclear power plant. So before Russia could actually operate this plant, Russia has to do a couple things. One, they have to make a new declaration to the International Atomic Energy Agency modifying their nuclear holdings. They have to declare the plant, declare all the nuclear material on that plant. The IAEA will then need to go in and do an inspection to verify the Russian declaration. And then Russia is going to have to demonstrate to the IAEA that it can operate the plant safely. Now, this isn't automatic, because many of the people who work for the plant, even under Russian occupation, are Ukrainians, some of whom don't want to work for the Russians right now. And so, with the plant transferring over to Russia, they're leaving. Russia fired the head of the plant just recently because it was turned out that he was supplying information to the Ukrainian military. Imagine that, a Ukrainian citizen supplying information. Of course he was. That's what all patriots do. But my point is, Russia can't operate this plant. Even if Russia wanted to operate this plant, if it was operating this plant right now, void of IAEA certification, Russia would have a problem. Now, here's the interesting part. Can the IAEA accept the Russian declaration? Because by accepting the Russian declaration, the IAEA would be de facto recognizing Russian sovereignty over Zaporizhia. So Russia's in a little bit of a bind here right now because the world doesn't recognize its annexation of Zaporizhia. Therefore, the world can't recognize its sovereign control over the nuclear power plant. So I'm just saying right now, anybody who thinks that Russia was going to get away with a quick and easy fix to its electrical generation problem has no clue how the real world works. There's a lot of issues that need to be resolved, a lot of diplomacy that needs to be undertaken. The IAEA is going to have to come up with some mechanism of monitoring this plant to ensure that it operates in compliance with this, or the Russians just shut the plant down, which means they're not going to get any electrical power out of it. So there's just a lot here that isn't being discussed. You have a lot of people out there saying things and they just don't know what they're talking about. No offense, because these are very complicated things. And this is one of those issues where everybody's talking. I don't condemn anybody for talking. I don't condemn people concerned. And I don't condemn people for having ideas that aren't fully substantiated by fact. So maybe I came off with a little flippant there. I'm not.
No, Scott. That's why you're here, though.
It's why I'm here, and it's why there's other people out there as well, people who know these things. So, I hopefully people are listening and not taking umbrage, not thinking that I'm insulting them or anything of that nature. It's just these are complicated issues, and oftentimes when you take a look at the people talking about complicated issues and you see a very simplistic solution, that probably means that they're just not apprised of the totality of the facts that they probably should consider before making conclusions.
Yeah, they're more interested in the clicks, as they say nowadays. Because trust me, there's one thing, like with my audience at least, is that I tell them I'm not interested in just like only one half of a jet, hey, maybe we should do this, but they give no actual substance to the solution to the problem. You know what I mean? And it's just this childish worldview. It really upsets me because it's just like, guys, we're talking about life and death. We're talking about complicated systems. Everything cannot just be a quick fix. And I know I'm 26. I hate the fact that especially my generation, everything is so instant, so quick. And it's just like, no, some things you need to sit down and you need to actually go over the process of. And like I said, with this, it's even what we just know in regards to this the power plant situation is that they're now in the transitional period of the people who work there. It's not just, magic, snap the fingers, it's in Russian control. It takes some time. But yeah, thank you for very much answering that question because, like I said, it was something that was scratching off the top of my head. And, this is more something kind of humorous in regards to the fact that everyone's favorite neocon, John Bolton, is now officially calling for regime change in Russia. This is how you can kind of tell if things were really going well for the Ukrainians. And yes, they made some substantial gains. We're not dismissing that at all. But like I said, let's wait until the winter time. Let's see how things change. Let's see for the reinforcements to come in because things can just change like that. But it just shows the absolute desperation in this regard. And like you just said, we have a lot of sloppy CIA agents, feds, who really don't know what they're doing. And now to the point where they're now just thinking we now officially have to forcibly remove Putin. It's just they're not interested in any form of peace. We already know for a fact that Boris Johnson and Macron, they sabotaged the peace between Macron making a peace deal. I think it was all the way back in April or
April,
March.
yeah.
Yeah, it was April. Okay, yeah.
But it's not that humorous. I mean, John Bolton is a joke, with or without his mustache. But so there it is. I made a humor. But the concept of regime change is not new, especially regime change involving Putin. People, do you remember the? You say you're 26, so we're going back a little bit in time. But
Scott, I have no life. It's okay. I do this for a living to research.
In 2009, a guy named Michael McFaul was on the National Security Council of the Obama White House. He was the Russian expert, and he came up with a concept that they called the Russian reset. And it was really interesting because he managed to get Hillary Clinton to get together with Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister of Russia. I mean, we can reflect on that for a second. How many Secretary of States have we had since Clinton? And how many foreign ministers have Russia had since Lavrov? Oh, wait, Lavrov's still a foreign minister. Maybe that's why there's continuity in everything the Russians do. But that's a different issue. They presented this yellow box with this red button with this word in Russian that we claimed meant reset, but it really meant overload. Like if you push it, there'll be an overload in relations. Lavrov politely reminded Clinton that we really don't want to push this button, but they pushed it anyways. But the purpose of reset wasn't to make better relations. The real purpose was to empower a guy named Dmitry Medvedev, who is now at that time president, having done an interesting little constitutional flop with Putin. Putin had completed his second term as president. Constitutionally, couldn't do a third. So they switched positions. Medvedev, who was prime minister, became president, and Putin, who was president, became prime minister. And the United States was going to take advantage of this 4-year window that was created by this flip to empower Medvedev to stay in power, to keep Putin out. Regime change. That was the whole purpose of the Russian reset. And it carried on even when McFaul became ambassador of the United States to Russia. The policy was never to let Russia determine its own outcome. The policy was to get Medvedev to push Putin out. How do we know this? Well, Joe Biden, Mr. Vice President, in March of 2011, flew to Moscow and met with the combined membership of the Russian political opposition. So again, I'm saying this right. The Vice President of the United States flew to Moscow and met with the political opposition in Russia and told him straight up, it would not be in Putin's best interest to seek another term as president. It would not be in Russia's best interest to seek another term. I mean, this is Mr. Son of a bitch, $1 billion. The prosecutor disappeared. Biden's a horrible man, but he was directly threatening Putin and directly threatening Russia. Did Putin take the threat? No. Did Medvedev take the threat? No. What happened? Putin's party ran for the parliament in, I think, in December of 2011. Hillary Clinton made some disparaging comments about Russian democracy, but his party won nonetheless, guaranteeing that he had enough votes in the parliament to do what? Get Medvedev reappointed prime minister, which was an important step. And then in March of 2012, Putin ran for re-election, won the presidency, and he's back in power. And ever since then, the United States has been engaged in a forceful policy of undermining Russia economically and politically. Navalny, this great guy, he's a CIA asset.
That's what I mean, yeah.
But he's 100% a CIA asset. All you have to do is take a look at the fellowship he did, I believe, in Colombia. I don't want to give away too much, but go through, it's on the website, go through the biographies of the class sponsors, that is the Americans who were put over the class, and scour the biographies for somebody who may have served in the intelligence community, whose job was to identify people. I'm just saying that it becomes obvious what happened here. People selected for the program he's in all become CIA assets or U.S. government assets. Well, that's how we do this, and they're monitored and run by an officer assigned to the program. So we know this. This is why he's in jail. The Russians are being nice. They're just calling him corrupt. They should shoot him for being a traitor. How do we know this? I don't know. Like the British, had this intelligence rock in Moscow that their spies would come by and communicate with this fancy little device, and they would transfer money to it, and the money would be picked up by the opposition that would come by, and the Russians happened to collect it all. The Russians sat there and went, "Whoa, really? You built a rock just for us? Okay." And they intercepted all the signals, and then they went in and they arrested everybody, got the rock, got the devices, got all the communications. They know everything. They have all the payments and all the names, and they know it all. This is why when they shut down the NGOs, and everybody, oh my God, the Russians are horrible. They're shutting down the innocent NGOs. Nothing innocent about them. The Russians know who received money and why they received money. This is America and the British working to undermine Russian democracy, to achieve regime change. And Zelensky has taken it to the next level. He's calling it the new Maidan. He wants the United States and the world, through sanctions and other, to create the conditions that the Russian people will rise up. That's the whole purpose of sanctions. The sanctions weren't targeting Putin. The
No, it's
sanctions weren't
targeting Russians.
targeting the Russian people. This was the West declaring war against the Russian people and trying to get the Russian people to be so damaged, to hurt them, to bring harm to them, to destroy their lives, to destroy their livelihood, to destroy everything about what makes their life worth living, so that they would rise up and remove Vladimir Putin in a Maidan type event. This is the entire strategy, and it has failed spectacularly. So when John Bolton comes out and says, we should be pushing regime change. Wake up, John. We were doing it when you were the national security advisor. We've been doing it since 2009, at least. And it's been done under Democrats and Republicans alike. Remember, it was invented by Barack Obama. Donald Trump may have put it on the back burner, which is one of the reasons why John Bolton's so frustrated, because he really wanted to do this. He wasn't able to, because Trump said something amazing like, why can't we just be friends? No, you're not allowed to be friends with the Russians. And Joe Biden, Mr. Son of a bitch, Mr. I warned Putin, Mr. I looked him in the eyes in a cold-hearted killer, and whatever else Joe Biden can say, he's now president. That policy is alive and well and living in the United States. Our policy towards the Russian government is 100% regime change. And you know who knows this? This doesn't require Scott Ritter to sit here and come up with this newsflash. The Russians know, fully aware of this. And it's just not going to work. It's stupidity personified, but it does dictate what's happening on the ground, on the battlefield right now. The reason why Zelensky is throwing all of his resources, and I mean all, he has stripped his reserves from everywhere. This is a full court press to try and create the perception of inevitable Ukrainian victory, inevitable Russian defeat. He has to get this done before the reserves get mobilized. But what he's trying to do is break the will of Russia, break the spirit of the Russian people, to create the conditions for a Moscow Maidan. This is his whole gambit. And when it fails, and it will fail, the Ukrainians, instead of having a solid military, will have an overinflated balloon. And that balloon is going to be popped by the Russian military, and there's going to be a collapse like you haven't seen. And this is why it's an act of desperation on the part of Zelensky and everybody else, including Bolton. They are desperate. You're seeing the West panic right now. You're seeing Europe start to panic. They're starting to wake up with the fact that A, they're not going to win in Ukraine. B, there's not going to be a Moscow Maidan. And C, they're going down the toilet faster than anybody anticipated them to go down the toilet.
Yeah, we're seeing the end of an empire without a doubt in that regard, because the thing that I've noticed is that, well, this is my observation on the timeline, and with you kind of, I mean, some of the things you've talked about, being there towards the end of the Cold War, so you were there in certain things, so you're free to correct me on some of these things. So my observation, post-Soviet Union going to Russia with Yeltsin, is that, a thing that's not mentioned that as much is that when he was in office, he banned specifically the Communist Party and nationalist parties, or they came under very heavy scrutiny. That doesn't really get mentioned all that much from what I've recalled. But like I said, Yeltsin was obviously the, Western puppet. He was so unpopular that the CIA had to get involved in '96 because, I forget his name, but he was the candidate for the Communist Party. But the main point is he was I think he got 32% and Yeltsin got 35%. He obviously had to go to a second round, but he was that unpopular that he was this close to losing his power. But
he lost the election.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
We stole it for him.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
We don't even hide it. We brag about it.
Yeah, no, it's openly on the front cover of Time magazine. But of course, yeah. But like I said, so then Yeltsin's a drunk.
Then who was involved in the stealing of that election?
Oh, let's hear it.
Michael McFaul.
Yeah, there you go.
There he is, Mister. I'm clean. He's dirtier than dirt.
McPhail, or as I like to call him. But the point is McFraud. There you go. But yeah, so then we come into Yeltsin resigns. He decides to give it to a former KGB officer, and they're thinking, okay, we'll see how this guy is, so forth and so forth. So they're a little, but they could tell some things are wrong because, well, first of all, you go from the 90s where you had the Chechen War, which, basically the biggest rivals between one another, the Chechens and the Russians. And then Putin comes in and he takes a second whack at it with the Second Chechen War. And, they basically stabilize the situation. There's a bit of insurgency there and there. But all of a sudden, he turns the biggest rival between the Russians to their secret weapon, Like, that's one of the things I said in my email was that how the hell did the Chechens go from like the biggest rival to the Russians to basically their secret weapon? Like, how the hell that happened? From like, the first Chechen war to the second. Like, could you explain that out of curiosity?
Sure. I mean, the first Chechen War, you need to understand what set it off. It wasn't a war of Russian aggression. The first Chechen War broke out, I think, in '93. I could have the dates wrong here. Old senile, it does that. But what it was you had specific clans. Chechen's a very clannish society, and you had clans who were seeking to exploit, as everybody else was, the economic collapse of the Soviet Union. They wanted to take over the oil fields and the pipelines, and they wanted to gain access to the income that was derived from that. And so they moved unilaterally. I believe they had a regime change where they forced out one president who might have been leaning towards Russia, replaced him with a guy who was going to empower people to do this energy seizure. And the Russians said no, but the Russian army that went in was the army of a failed state. The military budget had collapsed. Many officers weren't receiving their pay. Many troops weren't receiving their pay. The equipment wasn't properly maintained. They didn't get a chance to train properly. And the first units that went in literally got slaughtered. The first Battle of Grozny is the story of armored regiments and motorized rifle regiments being trapped in Grozny and annihilated. And then the Russians tried to win the first war, and it didn't. It turned out to be very much a stalemate. The second Chechen War is different. This war, and Vladimir Putin's actually alluded to this significantly, was a CIA-funded conflict where the CIA was sending in jihadists, sending in money, weapons to empower and radicalize, Chechen society to undermine Russia. And what the Russians did in response was, A, they came in with a better military, more focused military, but B, they recognized what the conflict was. It was literally a Chechen civil war. These were clans against clans. And so the Russians empowered the clans that weren't buying into the corruption and sided with them, and then enabled them to win, to defeat these outsiders. Because many Chechens, while they not necessarily in love with Russia, what they didn't want is to be radicalized by outsiders. They resented these foreigners coming in. They resented the foreign money, the foreign influence, because that disrupts traditional clannish leadership. I mean, it's a clannish society. It's very democratic in a way where clan leaders come together and they talk about, what's good for everybody. And, they say, okay, you have a legitimate need you've identified. We're going to allocate resources. We're going to give you this. We're going to give you that, et cetera. And when you have outsiders come in, they disrupt all of that. And so many Chechen clans and the leaders of those clans said, no, Russia's actually coming in here and respecting our way of life, respecting who we are, respecting our clannish structures, and working with us to rid us of this foreign influence. And that's what the Second Chechen War was all about, the purging of foreign malign influence out of Chechnya. And you ask yourself, why are the Chechens in love with Russia? Because Russia saved Chechnya. Chechnya today is a very independent republic. I mean, they operate with their own way of doing things. They have a leader who's very, very.
Yeah, he's quite the figure. Actually, despite, I was going to say there was recently kind of like a joke award ceremony over the fact that he was the most sanctioned Russian out of all the sanctions that have been put on like Russian politicians, and he had like over 200, and he just jokingly accepted the award and everything. But I'm not going to lie with is it Kadyrov or how do you say his name?
Kadyrov.
Kadyrov. Yeah, I was going to say with Kadyrov, like what he said recently after what was it, Le Mans, like about like possibly like dropping like a nuclear weapon. I just thought that was
he doesn't control nuclear weapons. He doesn't have any say over nuclear policy, etc. It's just his way.
I know that. I know that. I just thought that was just kind of a really
what he has done is mobilize 40 to 60,000 top-notch light infantrymen who are participating in this conflict. And he, the Chechens are highly regarded. The victory in Mariupol can be linked to them. A lot of the victories in Donetsk can be linked to them. None of the failures can be linked to them. They're there now. They're fighting hard. They're paying heavy price, but they're solidifying the defenses. They're going on the offensive where necessary. And ask yourself, What motivates a man to fight and die in a cause? The cause. The Chechens have bought into this cause in Ukraine because in their minds, it directly replicates what had happened to them. They know the West is ignorant. The West doesn't know what happened in Chechnya. They know. They know what the CIA did. They know what MI6 did. They know what the Saudis did, even though they're working with the Saudis now. They know about the exportation of Islamic jihad, into their territory and what it did to their society, tore it apart, destroyed it from within. They know this. So when they take a look at what NATO is doing in Ukraine to Russia, Russia that helped them become the nation they are today. Look at Grozny. The Russians bombed it into oblivion. The imagery coming out of Grozny in the 90s, exceeded some of the damage you saw in Stalingrad. Today is a totally rebuilt city with a functioning economy. People are living well. The Chechens know this is why they're doing this. And, in the West, we tend to minimize it. In the West, we tend to mock it. We make fun. There's ain't nothing funny about the Chechens. Ask anybody who's gone up against them. These guys are hard fighters, and they're fighting for a cause they believe in. Even when Kadyrov disagrees with something, the last thing he says is, we will obey the commander of the Russian Federation, and we will take his orders, and we will implement his orders. That's a relationship built on respect. This is not the relationship of a defeated, subservient, subhuman. This is a relationship of an equal, somebody who stands there side by side with Russia because they stood side by side with Russia when Russia saved them from foreign intervention.
Mm-hmm. You're absolutely correct on that. I guess but yeah, thank you. That answered a lot of my questions, and hopefully for the chat as well. I was going to say, so what you see what Putin does, he makes basically, the Chechens, longtime rivals into their strongest allies. He, cuts a lot of poverty in half. Like everyone's seen the videos of the 90s Russia, child prostitutes on the street and everything. It was absolutely terrible. And it's just, people don't seem to get, maybe, don't get me wrong, I think some parts of Putin, there is probably corruption, there's oligarchs, I've never denied any of that in regards to Russia, but maybe...
Can I just push back on that for just a second?
Sure, go nuts.
And the reason why I want to push back is, not again, Putin's a Russian president.
Yeah, of course.
He's not mine. So I have no stake in his political future whatsoever. But facts are facts are facts. The decade of the 1990s was the decade of the oligarch. That's when the oligarchs came into being. Who wasn't an oligarch? Vladimir Putin.
Oh yeah, no, he's from the KGB.
When everybody says he's former KGB, he was a lieutenant colonel who was involved in political intelligence in East Germany. What I'm trying to say is he was a dime a dozen. There was nothing spectacular about this guy. He wasn't a spy master. He wasn't the man at the top pulling all the strings. He was a run-of-the-mill KGB officer in a sort of boring overseas post, Dresden, Germany. It's not even frontline. It's just Dresden, Germany. And he came back and, for Mr. I'm KGB, I'm the most powerful man in the world. When he first came back to St. Petersburg and left the KGB, he was a taxi driver trying to find his way. He managed to get appointed as part of the mayor, Sobchak, I believe was the mayor at the time. And he got into his circle. But there's so much, everybody's like, yeah, see, he's on the inside, he's corrupt, he's getting money. Except you have, I can point to every single oligarch, and I can have tons of people coming up talking about how they stole money, how they bribed, how they did this. You won't find a single eyewitness that talks about a bribe taken by Vladimir Putin. None. Fact is, you find just the opposite. There's the U.S. consul who was in St. Petersburg calls him straight out and says he's the most honest man I ever met of the Sobchak group. You have NGOs and other business people who come in, and they had to go through the whole, the St. Petersburg waltz, which is basically you come in, you talk to a board person, they leave a number, they come back, you have an envelope with the appropriate bills in there that meet that number, and then they go off and they may or may not do what you asked them to do. But that's how you had to do business. Everybody who met with Putin said that, one, he listened to everything they said. Two, he asked really good questions. And three, most of the time, he told people, "No, we can't do this because we're not ready for that. We haven't done the adequate preparation for this. Come back to me later, and we can do it." And it wasn't come back to me later with money. He never asked for money. Didn't want money. He's not corrupt. This is the point. This is why Yeltsin brought him in, because he was incorruptible. Yeltsin was surrounded by corruption.
Hmm.
Surrounded by corruption. He brought Putin in because Putin was uncorrupted, uncorruptible. And that's why he turned to Putin in the end, because all of the corrupt cronies of Yeltsin would have sold him down the drain. The moment Yeltsin resigned as president, lost power, they would have sold him and his family down the drain. Yeltsin would be in prison or hung. His family would be destitute.
Oh,
He turned to Putin and he said, "Here's the deal. I'm going to make you president, but you have to protect me." And Putin kept that deal. But Putin was an accidental president. He wasn't meant to be president. And that's what took the world by surprise. This guy didn't come in and tell the oligarchs, "Okay, let's continue business as usual. Everybody gather around. How can we all make money?" What he told the oligarchs is, "I understand the level of your corruption, but I also understand how you are integrated in the economy. So here's the deal. Keep the economy functioning. You can make your money, but you've already made most of your money. But you stay out of politics and you run your businesses clean, especially when it comes to the government. When we tell you to do something, you do it. No kickbacks, no bribery, no schemes. Stay out of politics." Well, what happened? Lucas Oil, I think, Khodorovsky, decided he wanted to challenge Putin on that, and Putin crushed him like the bug he was. Crushed him, terminated his businesses, put him in jail, exiled him, shut it down. Why? Because Putin was stealing it to enrich himself? No, because Putin's an honest broker who cares about Russia more than he cares about making money. Anybody who calls Putin corrupt has no evidence to back that up. It's purely the supposition and speculation of the corrupt people that Putin's run out of office. Putin didn't shed a tear when the West sanctioned the oligarchs. In fact, it's just the exact opposite. He said, "Get the hell out of Russia, and if you're out of Russia, don't come back. You've taken the money, you've got your villas, you've got your penthouses. Stay away from us. We don't want to have anything to do with you." One of the best favors the West did to Putin, because by getting rid of the oligarchs, they actually liberated Russia economically now to make a strategic pivot away from the West, where all the oligarchs were heavily invested, to the East, where no oligarchs were invested. So, Putin's not corrupt. I don't buy into any of that.
Hmm. Uh, well, first of all, that was incredible. I will say, definitely. Um, just to clarify my position, like what I was going to say was like I would definitely believe there are corrupt aspects of Russia to be there, as I
Sure.
said.
Yeah.
And
We're seeing that right now with the mobilization.
Exactly.
We're seeing that with the mobilization.
Yeah. What was this? Sorry, Scott. So just let me just get through my point here. But the thing is that what I was going to say in regards to Putin is that as much as there may seem to be corruption in Russia, you may see from the pictures of the 90s to now and how Putin turned things around, maybe you would think that maybe he's just a really popular guy. That's what I mean. But most of the West don't understand that. And like I said, throughout the 2000s, things improved. Like, access to resources, internet was spread, gas was booming, all that good stuff. And then, of course, he realizes, oh, I can only run 2 terms, so like let's play musical chairs with Medvedev, and then suddenly that's when you have what you just explained with the attempted regime change. But of course that failed. And I even remember it was 2011. I was in high school. I remembered the second when they were really pushing this regime change stuff in Russia. Actually, 2011 was the year of the regime change anyways. We all know that. But the point is that that's where I started to notice when this second Cold War started to happen. And that's where you had the lead up towards, Euromaidan, because they're like, okay, we're going to use Ukraine as a doormat to go into, push regime change in Russia. That's what I've told people all this time, is that that's pretty much what this war has been leading up to. Now you're seeing this, because I've seen some people in my chat were bringing this up, and trust me, I was going to bring this up to Scott. We are now seeing that there's a push going into Belarus, because you recently did a live stream. I forget her name, but on YouTube, she's a Polish lady.
Anya.
Yeah. She was going over how, like, in the Polish parliament right now, they're pushing a lot of these, like, martial law type of laws for preparation. And it makes you just think to yourself, like, man, they're definitely prepping up for something, because you got, I forget her name, but, the fake, plant Belarus leader. I just call her Slava Guaido for short, because she's got a long name. But they're definitely like prepping up like the transitional council's army and things like that. And I have to just ask, like, I feel like we're going to see something in regards to Poland and Belarus, or just Belarus in general. I'm sorry to say this. This may seem like like a total buzzkill, but we have about 2 minutes left in this meeting here. I would like to start this back up, going into that subject, because
Well, I
I know
can't.
it's.
Unfortunately, this
Oh,
is where I have to say
oh yeah.
uh, I got that doctor's appointment.
Oh
So
shoot, yeah. In 15 minutes, you got to go. But yeah, for those who don't know, we actually had to bump up this live stream about an hour earlier. But I thought, it would be worth it. And like I said, we'll definitely talk about that for next time, because I mean, long story short, I think you would agree there's something going on in Poland, and they're prepping up for something. Like, yes, no, maybe.
well, here's the deal. I'll try and answer this in the 1 minute 49 seconds we have. Poland does not get Article 5 protection if it initiates an act of aggression. If Poland, is an aggressor towards Ukraine or towards Belarus, Poland no longer has Article 5 protection, and Poland knows this. So um, there's a lot of talk, a lot of flexing, but that's for domestic political consumption in Poland. Poland's going to go through a hard winter as well, and the Polish government is very vulnerable to the whim of the people. In Gladiator, the public is fickle, my friend, and that's what all these people are going to find out. So I think Poland's doing a lot of muscle flexing for internal domestic consumption, but the reality is, Polish military is not capable of the kind of things that Polish government's talking about. The Polish military would be destroyed in a heartbeat by the Belarusian military, which would be backed by the Russian military, and the Poles know this. So I think this is just a bunch of politically motivated jaw flexing. There's not too much muscle to flex there.
Fair enough. And we're going to end it on that note. Thank you so much, Scott. We'll definitely talk another day, and take care.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.